Hey guys, in this video I want to share a few yoga poses that are going to be very beneficial for your feet for your tango dancing. So these poses will help to bring stability and flexibility to your feet and ankles, as well as to prevent injury and also just to bring about general awareness to how you use your feet in tango. So I'm going to introduce each pose, talk a little bit about how to get into it and what are some of the benefits of the pose, and then I'm going to discuss the benefits specifically for your tango dance and where that will show up in your tango dance. So this is not going to be a yoga class, so these poses are not in any particular order. They're not meant to be done as a class. So if you are looking for a class, you can check out some of the other videos I have on my channel, and you can also head to my website and I've got tons of free classes on there. And I've also just released a Yoga for Tango Dancers course, which has lots of classes specifically targeted for tango dancers. It takes you through a sort of progressive series, and there's lots of relevant tango exercises as well, so that you can start to see the similarities between yoga and tango and just learn a little bit more about your body. Okay, so you can go to my website to find all that information, and for this video I'm just going to start to talk about the poses. So in our first pose, we are going to go into toe squat. This is a yin pose, and yin yoga is very different from yang yoga. So if you're newer to yin, I'm not going to talk about the differences too much, but basically these poses are meant to be held passively and for a longer period of time than what you would normally hold in a yang type of class. And this is so that we can get into the joints and the connective tissues and the fascia. And so there's no muscular effort involved in this type of yoga, but it's very helpful, especially to bring more mobility and flexibility to support your yang practice and your tango dancing. So to get into toe squat, we're just going to come onto our hands and knees. And from here, bring your knees together, bring your feet together, spread out your toes, and then come into a seat on your heels. And from here, just lengthen your spine. And if this feels too intense, you can always bring your hands down in front or to the side of your legs and even lift your hips up off of your heels a little bit, and maybe just place a pillow or a blanket in between your calves and your thighs. And then you would just breathe naturally, big full breaths, and try to hold the pose for a minimum of 90 seconds, so about a minute and a half. And this is what's going to really get into the joints and fascia and connective tissues and all that. So like I mentioned, no muscular effort here. And if this feels really intense, you can get out of the pose and come back into it and just build up over time the ability to stay a little bit longer. And so this pose is really helpful to spread the toes out, to find that flexibility in your feet, in your ankles, to build stability in your ankles as well. And this is going to be very useful for us as tango dancers because we tend to cram our feet into our tango shoes, right? Often our tango shoes are really tight. And when we start to lose stability, rather than to spread the toes, which is going to help us with that stability, we tend to tense up and then scrunch the toes together even further, which is going to make us fall off balance even further, right? So we really want to start to spread the toes, and this pose will help us with that. As well, with the ankle strength, this is going to be very useful for smoother movements. So the more stiff we are in the ankles and weak, this will cause us to have movements that are a little bit more clunky. So as tango dancers, we obviously want to have smooth movement, and so opening up the ankles and building strength there will support this kind of movement. So I'm just going to demonstrate when we step in tango, as we extend the leg, we really just want to spread the toes out here. Even as we come forward and we extend the leg, really there's a spreading out of the toes. So for our next posture, we are going to go into ankle stretch, and this is also a yin posture. So it will also be held for a longer period of time and without muscular effort. So for this pose, you're going to come to a kneeling position with the tops of your feet down onto the mat, sitting on top of your heels, and you're just going to start to lift the knees off of your mat and walk the hands back behind you. Kind of bring them underneath your shoulders, fingertips pointing towards your knees. Press down into your hands to lift and open the chest and get some length through your spine. Now this can be very intense, so your knees might not lift up very far, and if you really feel that this is too much, you can place a pillow or a blanket underneath your knees and maybe walk your hands forward a little bit more, maybe bringing them to a pair of blocks. And once again, you're just going to hold this pose for a minimum of 90 seconds. And I'm not going to hold it for that long right now. I'm just going to demonstrate and then talk about some of the benefits. So obviously, one of the benefits is ankle flexibility, which is going to show up in our tango dance, especially when we extend the leg forward and back. So when I do this, I'm going to start with extending the leg back. I kind of push through my heel to begin extending that leg back, but as I bring that leg into a full extension, I need to unfurl, and that's going to be a lot of action for the ankle. So here I can spread my toes, as we did in our toe squat, and come into the big toe, come into the ball of the foot, and then I would place the weight into my heel. So this is going to facilitate that smoother movement, and also just to help us with traction, so not losing our balance, and just to allow us to express the music in a slower timing. So I may want to express a more melodic part of the music, and if I just kind of clunk my feet, then that might be more expressive of choppy music. So that's just an option. And then extending the leg forward, it's the same thing. So I would extend and point my toe. And now there are various techniques. So some people like to step into the ball of the foot after that extension, and others go first into their heel and then into the ball of the foot and then into the toes. That's the version that I use. I don't really point my toe and then continue there, but either way is fine depending on what is your goal or your style. The important thing is that here you find that flexibility in the ankle as you point the toe. So that previous pose will help us with that. Okay, so for our next pose, this one might be a little bit more familiar from your yang practice, and this one is called runner's lunge. And so here I'm just going to step one foot in between my hands and lift my back knee off the mat. I'm going to come onto my fingertips. I'm going to let my hips sink forward and down and just start to open and broaden the collarbone. And you might modify and come onto a pair of blocks here if this feels inaccessible. And then I'm just going to start to roll back and forth on that back foot, spreading the toes as I've done before. And this is going to really help with how we use our feet in our steps. So as I mentioned before, really rolling into that foot, rolling through the toes and the ball of the foot, and lastly the heel, and just sort of pressing that heel back is going to invite a lot of traction into our steps. So whether we're going forward, this is going to assist us in moving forward, or if we're going back, it's going to assist us in really rolling through that foot. So this is really one of my favorite poses to bring awareness to how we use our feet in tango, because it's just so clear and it just really helps you to use that whole foot. So this next pose is called half moon, and to get into it, I usually like to come from a warrior two. So just bring your feet together at the top of your mat and then step your left leg back, pointing your back toes towards the long side of the mat, bending into your front knee, so stacking that knee above your ankle. And from here, you would extend your arms out and gaze over your front middle finger. From here, to get into half moon, I'm going to bring my left hand to my hip and bring all the weight into my right foot and bring my right hand down to the floor, either to the floor or to a block. I'm going to stack my left hip on top of my right, so I'm going to open out the chest. Back toes flex towards my face, really pressing out through the heel. And once I found my balance, I can reach my left arm up towards the ceiling. And from here, it's going to be really important to press down, especially through the inner edge of that bottom foot to find your balance. Again, spreading toes and distributing the weight equally in all four corners of your bottom foot. And so this is a very common tendency of tango dancers when we step to roll onto the outer edge of the foot, which is where we often lose balance. So this pose is just a great way to bring awareness to really pressing down through that inner edge of your foot and to engage the whole inside of your leg so that you can find more stability in the center of your body. So for our next pose, we're going to come into Tadasana with your heels lifted, so coming onto your tiptoes. And so for this one, I'm just going to bring my feet together, arms by my side, stand up nice and tall, spread my toes, and then begin to lift my heels off the mat. And here I want to keep a nice long line through the back of my head, my tailbone, and my heels. So very similar to our posture in Tango. And then lower my feet down to the mat. So you can do that a couple times to build some ankle strength. Kind of simulates how our feet are when we're in high heels. And then lower down. And if you do this a couple times, you certainly will feel it in your ankles and your calves. And this is just another pose that's great for bringing awareness to spreading the toes out and getting that ankle strength, and also just finding that line all the way from your heels through the crown of your head, so that when we sort of lean forward to make contact with our partner's chest, we're not just sort of sticking the butt out and sticking the chest forward, but rather rising and coming into the ball of the foot with still a lot of awareness in our back body. So for our next pose, we're going to come into Malasana Yogi Squat, and this can either be done in your yin or your yang practice. And actually those first two yin poses are a really great way to open up and make this next pose a little bit more accessible. So there's several ways to get into this pose. You can come into standing, bring your feet to about the distance of the mat, pointing your toes out about 45 degrees, and then come into a seat, bringing your hips down in between your heels, bringing your hands together in front of your heart. I'll turn so we can see that a little bit better here. Bringing the hands in front of your heart and your elbows on the inside of your thighs, spreading your thighs apart with those elbows, trying to line up the knees with your toes just to protect the knees here, and just lift and open the chest. And if this feels too intense, then you can come up onto a block. So just lift the hips, place a block down, or 2 or 3 blocks, however many you need. And you can sit on top of those blocks. And this is a great way to open up the groins and thighs. It's a great ankle stretch and also just an ankle strengthener. So this is where we're going to really see that benefit. As I mentioned before, this will bring more stability into our dancing. It will also help with that smooth movement. And then the last thing here is it starts to bring awareness to some external rotation of the legs and having those feet sort of turned out a little bit, which we want to do as tango dancers. You've probably heard from so many of your teachers to just have a little bit of turnout. Now, this might be a little bit exaggerated. You probably wouldn't turn your feet out this far, but you do have a slight turnout in your feet, and this is helpful to kind of bring awareness to how you open up the hips. So in our squat, you have a lot more external rotation than what we would have in tango, but it just starts to open up the hips a little bit here for that. So here's our tango posture. So our next pose is actually 2 poses, and what I really want to focus on is the transition in between the 2. And so these are Cobra or Updog moving into downward facing dog. And so to get into these poses, you would just come to lying down on your belly. Bring your hands underneath your shoulders. Draw your elbows in close towards your ribs. Begin to press into your hands to lift your chest and head. Begin to lengthen your arms. Broaden your collarbone, draw your shoulders away from your ears. And so this would be Cobra with the knees down on the mat. If you're going to come into upward facing dog, you would hover the knees off of the mat. And then from here, that transition into downward facing dog would just be to lift the hips up towards the ceiling and keep the tops of the toes down so that you get that nice stretch through your feet. And I like to linger here for as long as I can, just to stretch there. Oh, it feels so good after a night of dancing, having your feet in your heels, mostly turned the other way. And then when you're ready to move into your down dog, you can untuck the toes and bring the soles of your feet down to the mat and your heels down towards the mat and your chest towards your thighs. So in that transition, it's really just a wonderful stretch for the tops of the feet. Feels so good, especially in a vinyasa practice where we do several vinyasas moving through those poses. You'll get a chance to stretch your feet several times, and each time go a little bit deeper into that stretch. So for our next posture, we're going to come into three-legged dog. And so we start off in downward facing dog here. So hands shoulder width apart, feet hips width apart. If you have tight hamstrings, you can keep your knees bent, drawing your chest towards your thighs, getting some length through your spine. And then press into your left foot and reach your right leg up towards the ceiling, so pointing your toes. And so here we are getting a nice calf stretch through the left calf, and we're also finding that sort of unfurling of the back foot. So this is going to be very similar for our tango dancing. So I'm going to come back to downward facing dog, where I would press back through the heel and then begin to uncurl at the ankle, pointing my foot, and just finding that flexibility through the ankle. So on this side, I'm also building that flexibility. I can come down and do it through the opposite side. Feels really amazing. Okay, so for our last posture, we're going to come into an easy twist, and this is basically just a lunge with a twist. So I'm going to come into a tabletop position and just step my right leg in between my hands, lift my back knee off the mat, really pressing out through that back heel, making sure to stack my right knee above my ankle. Then I want to press down into my left hand, reach my right arm up towards the ceiling as I find a twist. And so here we're getting all the same benefits as any other lunge pose, such as the runner's lunge we did earlier, where we get a little bit of a hip flexor stretch, we get some strengthening in the glutes, we get some flexibility and strength in the ankle and the foot, as well as the benefits of twisting poses, where we gain a little bit of spinal flexibility and also just engaging through the abdominal area. And so I find that this pose is a great representation of our cross steps in tango, so an ocho basically. So when I get into my ocho, the only difference would be that I'm not bending into that front leg as far. So I would have my weight into the front leg, I'd have an extending leg behind me, and then I'm going to find this twist through my upper body. And the common tendency here when we lack spinal flexibility, or when we're just searching for that twist, is to get the lower body involved. So I'm collapsing my hip and my back foot starts to sickle inwards. And what we really want is to find that twist really starting at the obliques and traveling up the spine through the upper back muscles. And once we've found that twist, now we would go into our pivot, which I'm not really going to do here because I can't pivot on this mat, but that's when we would send the hips and the back leg around rather than to take it all at once. And so this is very similar to what happens in this easy twist, where I'm trying to find this twist, and because I may be lacking that spinal flexibility or just trying to go deeper and not really paying attention to where the limit is, what I end up doing is kind of sickling that back foot and collapsing this hip. And so what we're looking for in this pose is really sending this left hip back, really pressing out through that back heel, and engaging the obliques for our twist, and then of course letting it travel up the body as well. And so that can help us to find the limit of our twist and to leave the lower body out of it. And so really just find stability through the lower body, through that back foot, and to engage the upper body for that twist. So I hope this video brought you some insight into how to better use your feet in tango and how yoga can help with that. And as I mentioned before, if you'd like to practice with me, you can check out the classes I have on my YouTube channel or dive into my Yoga for Tango Dancers course. All available on my website, lots of information there. If you have any other questions, please feel free to leave some comments below or just message me, and I hope I have an answer for you. Also, please, if you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, so that will help me to keep putting out more content for more dancers to benefit from. So thanks again so much for joining me. Namaste.